some sort of an AI agent that has all the known libraries from all the threat actors. It makes that attribution piece that much harder. But that also goes to our previous point that we don't want to.
NetSeg or bust, keep your network zero trust. NetSeg.io, where the data needs to go. NetSeg or bust, keep your network zero trust. NetSeg.io, where the data needs to go.
My name's Neil Pajoli from the NetSeg Industrial Cybersecurity Podcast, and here today is Chris Horsley from Cosive. Great to have you here, Chris. Could you start by maybe just introducing a little bit about yourself and what Cosive does?
Yeah, for sure. So my background way back in the day was working for national certs. So this is the sort of Incident Response Coordination Centre. So this was...
Was this in Australia or somewhere
Yeah,
else?
well, it started off in Australia working for AusCert when it was the national cert. This is about mid-2000s.
Yep.
And then I got this chance to go and move to Japan and work for JP Cert, which is sort of that counterpart organisation over there. So that was a really valuable experience.
Yeah.
Then it's about 11 years ago now, we founded Cosive, a few of us.
Yeah.
And then we wanted to very much focus on that cyber threat intelligence part and on security operations, because our backgrounds were generally from both of those worlds. And how do you do security operations, so, the incident response and secure operations centers, while informing it with threat intelligence. And when we started the company, I feel like we were a little bit early, like a lot of organizations hadn't yet spun up like formal cyber threat intelligence teams. And then we've seen that shift over the last, say, 10 years, where there's more and more organizations who have, they're starting to build out those threat intel teams, which is really exciting.
Yeah, great. So what does a typical client profile look like for your organisations you work with in your sweet spot?
Yeah, so for us, it goes across really all industries now, because anyone who runs, IT infrastructure or OT infrastructure, we're all getting affected by the same stuff.
Yep.
The teams who or the organisations who tend to have threat intelligence functions, typically a bit bigger. So we're talking things like banks, universities, resources sector, government, of course. So those are all
sort of
sectors
ASX 200 type size of organisations?
Yeah, typically. So they need to be at that stage where, they've got a cybersecurity team, but within that cybersecurity team, they've either got a person sometimes, or maybe a few people. Some of the bigger teams in Australia might have as many as, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah, right.
CTI dedicated people on the analysis side, on the engineering side.
Yeah.
And we work with, the gamut between like solo operators to the bigger ones.
Cyber threat intelligence is not something I've had a lot of personal experience with in my professional career. Could you maybe share a little bit about sort of why people buy threat intelligence, what threat hunting looks like? Just explain the landscape to maybe a cyber practitioner who maybe hasn't been deep in that domain knowledge. Yeah,
for sure. And I think when we say threat intelligence to people who have worked in that field, it makes sense, but it's a bit nebulous to people outside, I think. But I like to describe it as it's partly looking over the horizon at what's about to come down the pipe for us that we need to be ready for. And so without a threat intelligence function, we're often sort of working off guesswork or sort of anecdotes. Like we're seeing, our comrades and our colleagues in the industry talking about incidents that they've experienced, but we're doing it in a very scattershot, piecemeal way. Like we're hearing these stories. Threat intelligence function, when set up properly, it's giving you a much more rigorous way to make sure you're catching what's happening out there in terms of vulnerabilities or incidents or exploitation that we need to know about and take action on. And then building out that team in the right order with the right priorities and the right tools. That's really what the essence of what we talk about quite a lot.
So it's more about anticipating what could come versus detecting something that's already inside the organisation. So we often talk about a loop between the security operations part of the puzzle, which is much more about your detections, responding to tickets, running incidents, doing all that stuff, but that's all the responsive side. Threat intel is more on that, like what's going to happen soon, and what do we have to do on the threat detection side in particular, or the detection engineering side, to make sure that when this activity happens that we just found out about, we've either got, we've got instant response plans, we know the countermeasures we're going to apply, we know how to know if these things are happening in our environment. So that's what threat intelligence in part informs. Yeah, right. Okay, that's great. And so how does an organisation integrate that into their bit? Like what does it look? Is it a data feed? Like what is it? What do those internal CTI people do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it varies a little bit by the organisation, because we see people come into threat intelligence really from two main disciplines. One side are the technologists, who might have come out of incident response or detection engineering, let's say, and they've worked on that IT side for their careers. And then you see other people come from a lot of ex-military, ex-law enforcement people, and they're often coming at it from a different angle. And they're sort of more interested, I think, in sometimes the geopolitical factors, the threat actor side of the fence, the tradecraft. What is ideal is when you've got both of those people.
I was going to ask, do they work well together? And it sounds like when you've got those two perspectives working in unison, you can have a good capability. And look, certainly for the OT lens, I think the geopolitical angle is probably more pronounced than you'd see in the IT world, because we're talking about critical infrastructure, often sovereign national assets. Examples like the Volt Typhoon threat actor that's made its way, nesting in a lot of US organisations. Certainly in the OT world and critical infrastructure, I've seen a lot of organisations become much more conscious about that. And it's a different kind. I don't have to tell you, but it's a different kind of threat actor versus your typical cybercrime, ransomware, extortion type business model.
Very much, and the stakes are sort of a lot higher now, like you say, because when I started my career, this was 2004 in cybersecurity. Phishing was all the rage, and it was very much about that financial gain. And we'd gone from the hobbyists doing it for the lols, as we used to say. Then they were moving to like, hey, it looks like we can make some money out of this. And then, of course, we had the birth of ransomware, and I think cryptocurrencies and the birth, ransomware really taking off. You can make an argument about a correlation there as well. But now we've moved into nation states realizing what they can do beyond kinetic military capability. How can I soften up targets? How can I use this other method to achieve strategic objectives? And we're seeing that happening right now and for some years now as well.
Yeah, exactly right. So in the industry more than 20 years now. So what does that modern threat landscape look like in 2026?
Yeah, so the big ones we've seen, it's like we're saying, big shift across, so OT, we know it's being targeted, definitely seeing governments. They've been telling these stories for years and saying like, hey, these things are happening with our foreign adversaries, but now you're seeing them get increasingly hands-on. You're seeing more legislation come in, you're seeing more sort of mandatory reporting coming in. So you can see how governments are treating that part of the threat landscape very seriously. I think for a lot of organizations in terms of threat landscape, we are running so many tools, and enterprises are so complicated now as well. There's been a lot said about shadow IT. Anybody with a credit card can spin up a new SaaS service, and we've seen incidents like
shadow AI now.
Shadow AI as well. People are just running agents, open claws. When you go and dig into an organization, you start to find that people are running this stuff because they're seeing their own benefit. They're not waiting for the organization to say like, hey, I got you this tool. They're just out there doing it. So whenever we talk to people in big enterprises, you can see just the absolute complexity that they're dealing with. Even just knowing what have we got before it's how to defend it. It's like, what are we even sitting on here? That's been a big shift as well.
Right. No, it's fascinating. It's just moving very rapidly, particularly in the OT world where these systems are becoming a lot more interconnected. So how do you profile threat actors? I guess it's a two-part question. How do you profile threat actors, and then how do you profile threat actors specifically targeting OT environments that a lot of the organizations I work with are becoming a lot more conscious about?
For sure. And this is something that we've certainly noticed, and we've been doing more work with critical infrastructure organizations. Because now they're starting, again, I think part of this is that, they're realizing themselves, part is the, government agencies coming in and saying like, hey, you need to pull your socks up because this stuff is happening, and we can point to all of these cases. So threat profiling is something we've been doing. And there's different arguments about how to approach this. We like to go, some people are very focused on threat actor, for instance. So they'll say like, well, it's that government. That.
I'm glad you're not attributing any particular countries, because attribution I think it's unhelpful in a general kind of discussion.
Well, that's a really interesting point. So I'm one of the people, I know organizations, everything they do has to be attributed to something, someone, a threat actor group.
Yeah.
This is good. Like, definitely when we do threat profiling, one of the aspects is, well, who are the threat actors we know?
Yeah.
More interesting are the techniques they are using.
Yes.
And how do they achieve their objectives? Sometimes attribution is famously hard.
Yes.
Is the saying. So,
I think it can be counterproductive when, a certain nation is constantly mentioned in the media, which we've seen in Australia.
Yes.
It doesn't matter which nation it is, but
Yes.
if a certain nation gets mentioned, that kind of becomes the boogeyman. And,
That's it.
Realistically, these geopolitical things can shift rapidly. Mm-hmm. And if there's certain nations could be unfairly, attributed in the general public consciousness if they think they're the ones doing all the hacking when,
Yes.
these things can go across boundaries or the geopolitics can change quite quickly. And it can be counterproductive, I think, if you've got like one certain country in mind when you think, nation state sponsored something. Now, internally, running a SecOps function, I understand it can be useful to think about country of origin, things like that.
Yes.
But I had some mentors of mine have always said don't mention specific nations in the public media because it's probably not necessary.
Right.
And can be counterproductive, and I think that's probably a good one to err on the side of caution personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an whole separate interesting topic about how you profile threat actors.
Yeah, and I think it's one aspect. It's interesting whenever a government, and the Australian government has done this on a few occasions, and they've named a country, and they said this country is running a campaign against industries in Australia.
Yeah.
And whenever they do that, I have no doubt that that's a big deal, right? That's have to go all the way up to the top of the agency.
Yeah. They're not
happy?
being, cavalier. There's going to be a reason why they're doing that. I'm assuming. Yeah.
There'll be their reasoning there. But when we're doing threat profiling, we care to an extent about threat actors. But I think looking at the incidents that they have run is much more interesting because now you're looking at how do they accomplish their objectives.
Yeah.
One interesting argument of late. When we start talking about AI, and as we record this, that OpenAI has just sort of come out and admitted that one of their models in testing escaped containment and broke into Hugging Face, for instance. And there's more and more detail. And just very recently at Black Hat, they revealed that these agents were coordinating with each other and recording these things. I think it was in Artifactory. So they were recording details. So that's interesting that these agents, because they have all this massive training data set, they can learn from all of those other incidents of other threat actors. Because in the old days, we talked a lot about the pyramid of pain. We still talk about the pyramid of pain.
Tell us about the pyramid of pain, Chris.
So, pyramid of pain is this idea that we talk a lot, I think, in threat intelligence. We have threat intelligence feeds. Your classic things to put in them are things like IP addresses, file hashes, domain names. These are very easy to collect, but they have a very limited shelf life. Because threat actors can very easily repack a file with a new hash, or they can start using a new IP or spin up a new domain. What we would try to go for instead of operating on the bottom of this pyramid where it's sort of like easy, but kind of low value, we want to get to the top of the pyramid. And this is where we're talking about things like techniques and behaviors, because these are things that are harder for threat actors to change. Because once they've worked out a way to compromise a system, where they've got a 0-day or they've got a unique way that they're using to break into systems, if we can find out what those behaviors are, and we can work out how to see them in our environment, that's a much, it's got a better lifespan, it's more robust, it's less fragile than, well, if we see that IP. But if they use another IP, we'll have no idea it exists because our alert doesn't cover it. So we always wanted to get to the top of the pyramid of pain, harder to understand techniques, but much better payoff.
Yeah, okay. And so what sort of techniques are you seeing in OT environments, for example, that attackers are using? Yeah,
so what I would suggest everybody goes and reads, there's this great write-up from...
We'll put it in the show notes, so send me a link after.
So Cert Polska, and this...
I know the one you're talking about, Carry on.
Great report that they did. And in fact, again, as we record this, literally 2 hours ago, they released a part 2 of this report because they had to do all this extra analysis about what happened.
Oh wow, that's good timing. Well, we'll make sure to put it in there.
I literally just read it this morning.
Fantastic.
So probably won't go into too much detail. I'm still digesting the content of that. But the first report was about attacks against solar generation facilities in Poland. and they did some attribution about who was probably behind.
Probably
this.
accurate. Yep.
Yep, probably accurate. But what was really interesting was that the threat actor here managed to almost disrupt this generation. They weren't successful in this case, but they got a long way and very close to it. And it was a very destructive attack.
Yep.
So they weren't trying here to extort them for money or anything like that. They were just trying to interrupt generation.
Yep.
Part 2 today was about it was a different facility, not related to the solar generation, but they actually did manage to disrupt it.
Right.
But luckily, the operations staff in this facility managed to recover quite quickly, as in a space of hours.
Okay.
So that was really good that they managed to recover so fast.
They must have done their tabletop exercises.
Well, that's it. They were ready to go, it seemed.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
But what was fascinating in this report was that a lot of the reasons that this organizations, or all of the, I think there were about 30 solar plants, the reason they were compromised was mostly basic IT, OT hygiene stuff.
Yep.
It was default passwords. It was vulnerable edge devices. It was the ability that once they got to that edge device and they were inside it, whether it was via creds or via an exploit that was unpatched, they could just freely move in the environment. And they took their time. They managed to then compromise things like engineering workstations. They managed to brick other IT and SCADA devices.
Yeah.
And so they were very lucky that this wasn't a bigger incident. The timing was also very interesting. They timed this to be right around the Christmas period.
Yeah, right.
So the theory here would be that it was carefully timed, that there'd be a skeleton staff operating. Maybe less likely for it to be pulled up because you've got maybe more staff away. So it was done in a very conscious way, a very well planned. They did a lot of recon ahead of time as well. So the report is fascinating, and as you go through, you realise a lot of this stuff isn't too sophisticated. It was just that somebody sat down and they were very persistent about it. They were very methodical about it, about probing what was on this network, about compromising device after device, getting that foothold. And then when they were ready to execute, they did it in a really coordinated fashion.
Yeah, and I think that's, up until about 12 months ago, or even 3 months ago, that was the thing that separated critical infrastructure cyber attacks where nation states are involved, because they have got the resource, they've got a totally different objective.
Right.
And they can be very patient and persistent and take the time to do their research. Now, you can do an AI-born payload that does all that work for you. And doesn't cost you very much at all. You've just got to get it into the organization and it will find a way back out for you to command and control and do whatever damage you want to do. And I think that's something that, particularly in OT environments where it is often a lot of the things like the default credentials where, a carefully crafted AI malware payload is a very simple seed once you can get it into the organization to give you that foothold, and you don't have to do lateral movement. It's as simple as a compromised USB stick or something like that. And you're away, and it's going to be. I think it's going to be a lot of incidents, unfortunately, coming, but that's something I can really see on the horizon as it's going to have a massive impact. Yeah,
and I think the culture in a lot of critical infrastructure companies is changing and needs to change. Because in the past, a lot of these organizations, they're coming at it very much from that. Availability is the most important thing, let's say, for a distributor or a power grid provider, a generator. So it's very much coming at it with that engineering focus. But if we can compromise identities, if we can compromise devices, that would let me affect the availability of those resources, but I am compromising devices as I move through it. So there's a real shift in mindset here required from the engineering levels all the way up to the management of the company, because they've been running with a different set of incentives and I think a different mental threat model for a long time.
And the consciousness has, I think, really changed, and I think there's a lot of industry people have done a really good job of highlighting this risk, and I think also, to their credit, a lot of governments have done a good job of not just awareness of the general population, but putting some regulations in place around focused on critical infrastructure. And like we've got in Australia with the systems of national certificates, for example, and saying these are the most critical systems that we want a heightened level of protection around, and providing guidance to industry around how to how to do best practice cyber, and also coordinating information when incidents occur, being able to not each be attacked in isolation by a threat group, but share that information and kind of fight back in a coordinated fashion.
Indeed, and in fact, that's an interesting point you touch on, because a lot of the work we've done is about threat intelligence sharing.
Yep.
So we were involved some years ago in an Australian government project to set up a national threat sharing platform.
Yep.
And that's what we used to do in the national CERT world as well. It's when we would see something, let's say it was in Australia or in Japan, our objective would be to share that with our counterparts all around the place, because if we all are seeing different aspects of what's going on out there, so the more we can share. So this CERT Polska report is fantastic.
Yes.
So it very much follows that ethos of, we had this incident, we researched it, we analysed it, and rather than keeping it under wraps because maybe it sort of calls out some things that were missed, we want to get it out there to make sure that nobody else goes through the same thing we did and everyone else is better prepared. And so threat intelligence sharing is very much about that. How do we describe, how do we technically share, how do we convince people that this is the thing you have to pay attention to?
Yeah, and I think the cyber industry in general is pretty good at that. And you cannot have a victim blaming culture in this kind of industry, because it just weakens everyone else's preparedness if we don't share. Even if you're an organisation might have shown some negligence, let's not bring that into the discussion about what we can learn from an incident that can help others prepare better. That's the way it should be working, I think. Otherwise, we're just playing into the attacker's hands.
This is also true. Yeah, we've always seen this. There's a couple of dynamics at play here. So one is when you go and talk to people about threat sharing, that idea that when we've seen an incident or we saw even a near miss, something that almost happened.
Near misses can be very useful data points as well.
Incredibly, and it might just be that the attacker didn't get that last step in place because they couldn't work it out, or they were thwarted, or there was a control or an air gap or something. So those things are really important to share. While we often see the people on the defenders, and they see the value in this, because when their colleagues from other organizations are sharing this, incredibly valuable. But sometimes you see people higher up in the organization, and you might talk about here, certain levels of management, executives, lawyers, PR people. They're not always that keen to say hey, we almost had this incident, or we did have this incident, because what could it mean from maybe a PR reputation point of view, or what could it mean from a regulatory point of view? If we say we almost had this breach, will that leave us somehow liable? So there's these two dynamics of we know it's good to share, but we also know that it might open us up to some reputational damage, possibly. My personal view, and I get why that is the case. My personal view is certainly that we're all experiencing this stuff. So for any organization to act like they're not is kind of, it's denying a reality. That we're all getting targeted by this stuff, and sometimes it's opportunistic in the sense of, attackers are just probing, they're scanning all the time, and certainly AI agents are making that job easier for an attacker. But sometimes it is very targeted, and the attacker has identified strategic assets in a country that they want to have maybe it's for some future conflict. Because the big theme, going back to threat landscape earlier, and you mentioned, let's say, Volt Typhoon, it's that idea of pre-positioning, getting into the infrastructure, and then just sitting there and watching and waiting, and one day, when there is a geopolitical objective, they're ready to go. So it's not about the smash and grab, and we see a lot of that in the threat landscape too. I'd call out the DFIR report here, if anybody
I'll put a link
doesn't know about that
as well.
DFIR report is excellent. It does very detailed breakdowns of how attackers moved through environments. How did they get initial access? How did they move through that environment? How did they escalate privileges? What was the objective? And the stunning thing reading some of those DFIR reports is just how short it is from initial access to we've encrypted their files, or we've leaked their data. It can be hours. So you don't have much time to react to these things. And so you have both of these different types of threat actors. One is financially motivated, one is geopolitically motivated. They operate sort of different speeds, different sophistications.
Two totally different extremes with different objectives.
Very much. And you do also see, for an OT using organization or critical infrastructure organization, they could also get compromised by one of your financially motivated threat actors on the IT side. And if you don't have that really good separation between IT and OT, and that's something we constantly talk about when we're going and doing a threat modeling or a threat profiling engagement, it's that boundary of IT and OT. That's what you're scrutinizing really carefully. How, for the sake of convenience, and I've got operators who want to be able to remotely monitor this thing. One thing you see now is that these environments, just purely by their operating model, they can't be air-gapped. Because sometimes the operation of these facilities is being outsourced to some third party. And that third party then have remote monitoring and telemetry. So immediately there's internet connectivity between vendor and your assets. So what does that open you up to as well?
All sorts of things. You know, we're just, I see it a lot, and it's, you can't just isolate a system from the outside world now. And so you need to broker some sort of connectivity, both between OT and IT, and also OT and external world, and usually they like come in through IT and then separately move across the jump box or some other kind of remote access mechanism. But, you know, and there's all sorts of, again, shadow remote access that can appear in these environments. Contractors put 3G modems in cupboards and things like that.
That's it.
So having like a corporate sanctioned, rugged, you know, rigorous method that's audited and all that, but also closing the door to the alternative access mechanisms by monitoring that environment. And, you know, because, you've got your control, but you also need a critical control verification that, you know, you don't have that unwanted IT to OT lateral movement. And that Mexican water utility breach was another interesting one very recently, where it was AI initiated, you know, operating within the IT, and they go, well, I actually can see a path to get across the OT network. I know from my own model that that's probably going to be a more valuable asset, so I'm going to move into there and get a foothold on servers in that OT environment. And so this is just the reality of what we're living in the middle of 2026. And
well, that's it. And it's
give
moving.
it 2 months and it'll be completely different again.
Well, that's it. And it's just the rate of change here is quite extraordinary. And after OpenAI came out and said, like, well, this thing escaped containment, and it did some really clever things to gain internet access when it wasn't supposed to be able to do that. And then it tried to achieve its objectives of, you know, topping a benchmark by trying to go and get those, you know, to directly, it was, you know, gamifying the way it would get that benchmark. With unintended consequences. And now we've seen a number of other organizations, Anthropic came out and said, like, yep, that's happened to us as well. And then you're starting to see these things come out of the woodwork. Unintended consequences, but in the hands of, it's interesting reading some of the OpenAI incident reporting, was that sometimes it could get stuck in silly loops. And it would just try the same thing over and over again. But I think more directed by an attacker. And they're using it to be the force multiplier for a team of skilled operators. I think, they're going to be a lot more effective, able to do broader attacks against an industry.
So what are you telling your clients today about how to prepare for this or what to do? Like, it must be totally different advice to a year ago. Like, what advice are you giving your clients about how to prepare themselves for this new landscape?
It's quite fascinating. I think everybody is kind of trying to work this out in real time because it is evolving so quickly. It's interesting reading some government bulletins just in the last couple of months. And one is saying, be really careful of the risks of AI because, you know, models could get poisoned, or these things could, you know, take actions that are unintended if they're not isolated and sandboxed. And then a month later, you see an advisory that says, like, you have to start adapting AI for your defenses because you can't move fast enough. So there's these dual messages of, like, be really wary of AI, but you have to adapt AI because otherwise you're not going to be able to move as fast as attackers.
Well, you've got to fight fire with fire, otherwise it's asymmetric warfare.
And really fascinating as well, that something that came out from that OpenAI Hugging Face incident, that once they realized there was an incident underway within Hugging Face, they tried using some of those commercial models. I think they quoted both OpenAI models and Anthropic models. Both of them refused to undertake certain defensive analysis tasks because it was outside of guardrails. So they ended up using an open model that they were self-hosting, and luckily for Hugging Face, that's something they're very, very good at. And they used that open model, which gave them the analysis of the logs to try to piece together what was going on. So it was a really interesting example of both an AI based attack, but also an AI enhanced defense at once. And I think a lot of organizations at the moment are really, and you see this at trade shows at the moment, the number of AI SOC, agentic SOC.
Oh, you've got to have something AI in your product. Yeah, I've actually just launched the alpha of a AI chatbot, which is basically my program methodology, and I've just put a chatbot front end on it and a few other things.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, well, this is a way for me to scale down to small organizations who maybe wouldn't pay me to work for them on a fractional basis, but can get some basic advice to get them started and then, you know, use me later on if they need to.
Yes.
You know, we just got to adapt and leverage it and try and use it for good, I suppose.
Yeah, very much. And I think at the moment, there's this absolute scramble because, I mean, when we think about it, like again, as we record this, it's been 3.5 years since ChatGPT was released.
It feels like less than that for some reason, but a lot's happened since then.
A lot. And of course, you know, ChatGPT wasn't the birth of AI at all. That was decades earlier. But it was really, everyone's imagination got captured by, this is what you can do with AI.
Yeah.
I think because it just introduced this new interface, this new way of interacting with language for one.
Yeah.
And so since then, there's, you know, as we know, there's been everyone's on a tear trying to work out the best practices. Software development, again, it's been hugely disruptive to software development as well.
Yeah.
And
well,
also
I mean, this chatbot, 6 months ago, I would have had to like do API hooks and JavaScript and stuff and try and kludge it together. And now I can be like, go to a model, I'm going to upload my source documents, I put a few prompts in, put the iframe on my website, bang, we're away.
Well, that's it.
You know, I did that in a couple of hours.
Yeah, and there's a lot of software now being launched, whereas in the olden days, it might have taken us months for, you know, developers to work on this thing, and we would go through a whole bunch of rigorous, you know, assessments. We go through security tests. We would have a whole, you know, a threat model to begin with. We would do threat profiling against it in an ideal world, or threat modeling against it. Now we're seeing people move much, much faster. Whereas in an afternoon, they can knock together a web-based productivity app and just release it. And it's out there, and there's a lot less formal programs in an enterprise than we might have had back in the day. So again, this introduced possibly new risks.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Now, one of the other really interesting points that you gave me when we caught up for the first time was about the way AI makes it very hard for you to model threat actors. And it'd be really interesting for you to share that with the audience about, you know, when you're mapping techniques and using those to attribute certain threat actors and things like that, how AI has really blurred those lines now.
Yeah. So earlier we talked about the pyramid of pain.
Yeah.
And we said that the expensive part was the techniques. So for a threat actor to work out, hey, we've developed a new zero-day exploit against this system, and we're going to guard that with our lives because that's our secret sauce. And if we can use that for as long as possible without getting detected, we'll be able to compromise, you know, more environments, more victims. So there was that telltale sign of like, when we see this behavior, we know it's that threat actor. But now we know that these new AI models are incredibly good at just drinking the milkshake of data from across the internet. So they have access to all of these libraries. So traditionally, threat actors, you know, human threat actors, had developed their own tactics, their own tool chains, and they would use those tool chains over and over again because it was the most efficient way for them to operate. But if now you have some sort of an AI agent that has that all the libraries from all the known libraries from all the threat actors, it makes that attribution piece that much harder. But that also goes to our previous point about we don't want to be, I mean, yes, attribution is definitely interesting and can be very valuable, but we don't want to get fixated on it, I think. Because we want to come back to techniques and behaviors and how do we both defend against these things ever getting into our environment, or how do we detect it once it has come into our environment?
Does AI make it easier for you to do good threat intelligence and understand what's coming?
Definitely. So a challenge for threat intelligence analysts, and so earlier you were talking about what's the work of a threat intelligence team. So coming back to that for a start. So
I like how we're closing all these loops here. This is
we've had many loops in the air, and now we're bringing the wall.
We spent a lot of time planning this.
we're landing many planes now.
So
threat intelligence analysts, the first thing they're doing is they're looking for what what's out there that we care about. We call this priority intelligence requirements.
Yep.
So what we're going to do is go into our organization and going like, all right, what are the crown jewels of our organization? What software do we run? Which threat actors might like to, for either financial or geopolitical reasons, come and attack us? That's going to be the lens that the threat intelligence analysts are going to start scouring. And we also talked about looking over the horizon. So we're not just looking at like what's happening in our environment, we're also looking at what's going on out there in other environments.
Yes.
Now what we want to do is, when we get a report like Cert Polska's, and it's got all this absolute gold when it comes to, this is describing the tradecraft of this threat actor and potentially other threat actors really well, how do we then convert that into something actionable in our organization? And actionability is something we talk about a lot in threat intelligence, because us just reading PDF reports all day is interesting, but it's not going to improve the defensive nature of our organization. To improve that, we need to go out and talk to stakeholders in the organization, and that's going to be at the executive level, where we describe the threats to them and say, this is what's coming down the pipe. These are the things you probably need to fund. And they might be controls, they might be staff, they might be a strategic uplift in a certain, it might be a scatter environments, let's say, because we know that the threat is increasing there. It could also be close links with our detection engineering people. So we have read this report, we found this certain technique. Okay, that's what we're looking for. Go make it a detection. Because we're going to write some sophisticated kind of detection that's looking at maybe a window across a day.
Are these like seam correlation rules, or are they more sophisticated than that?
Sometimes the correlation rules, so IOCs are the simplest. It's like, if we see that IP, if we see that hash, bad.
Bottom of the pyramid though.
Right, but other times it's like, oh, we've seen this account over the course of about an hour, start here, go there.
Anomalous behavior.
Anomalous behavior. This is out of time zone. This is like 2 o'clock in the morning. That's anomalous behavior for what that user is doing. But it matches this threat intelligence over here. So the challenge for threat analysts has been, I have reams and reams of unstructured data. But how do I now convey this to others? So AI definitely has a role here in taking the unstructured threat intelligence, putting it through the lens of our priority intel requirements, and giving me structured threat intelligence.
That's a great use case. That makes total sense. Like, I can see why AI would help do a lot of that grunt work where you need detail, but it would be very exhausting and time consuming for humans. And then you can even adjust the, higher fidelity information it's providing you to help inform or automate those actual detection tools, I suppose.
That's it. And a lot of threat intelligence teams, they're always asked to sort of prove their value. But the problem is, I can read 10, 50-page PDFs that's got great information, great intelligence, things we need to know. But if I just basically forward those PDFs onto my execs, onto my detection engineering people, they don't have time to read these things. So I need, as an intelligence analyst, I need to make it as easy as possible for them to understand why is this important to us? And I have to speak their language. So almost I have to operate a bit like a journalist. I have to have cut through. I need to show relevancy. I need them to walk away. So we often talk about this idea, and this comes out of military jargon, bottom line up front. Rather than them plowing through 50 pages, I need to, like a journalist, in the first paragraph, ideally the first sentence, give them a reason to keep reading and understand how important it is that we do something and we take some action here. So AI can help us here too. So firstly, extracting all the, I like to call it like the CTI nutrients out of a report. What are those, out of those 50 pages of good writing, what are the key things? And then second, how do I put it through the lens of what we care about for our organization? That's the value of a threat intel team inside an organization, is explaining it in a way that makes sense to us.
I think that's the other thing that AI has been good at for a while now, is you could take a whole lot of like general data and go contextualize this if I'm a mid-sized water utility, or if I'm a manufacturer of paper cups, or this health information if I'm a 42-year-old male who weighs 85 kilos, for example. I weigh more than that, but let's not go there.
Sure.
But contextualizing generalized information to a really focused, unique user and being able to go, well, this is what's relevant too.
That's it. And one point we've certainly been hammering with the adoption of AI into threat intelligence is that there's still absolutely roles. We still need more analysts.
Yep.
Most CTI teams I know are flat out, they can't nearly do enough with the people that they have. So AI is certainly an enabler. So before, they wouldn't have even been processing a lot of these reports at all because they just didn't have the time in the day to work through it, to extract everything, to write a report that did all that contextualization, that relevancy that we talked about. But the thing that's really important, we're always hammering, is you can't just send out reports all day and expect your threat intelligence to be effective, because I can write 10 great reports a day. If no one's reading them, there's no value here.
Yeah.
So the other part of it is continually talking to stakeholders and developing deep relationships with them. And it's a two-way street. As an analyst, I want to know what keeps you up at night.
Yeah.
What's the language you understand? What are your incentives? Like, what do you care about? Okay, I can write my reports so they are more tailored to you. And this isn't just one report I'm going to send out to everyone and blast it to the whole organization. I'm going to have one, maybe I read that Cert Polska report about the solar plant intrusions.
Yeah.
I have one version of the report for my executives. What do they need to know in the sense of organizationally? What does this mean? I have another version that I'm going to send to my OT engineering teams. I'm going to say, here are the lessons here for you. There were some basic OT hygiene things here that were missed. They're really easy improvements like default passwords, like patching. There's another one again for my detection engineers. How would you see that, the compromise of these edge devices, let's say? What's the anomalous behavior that we would be looking for? So that's just 3 different audiences. So as an analyst, I need to repackage that one intelligence report, or maybe a series of intelligence reports, because I understand those stakeholders. And to me, there's no replacement right now that AI can do for sitting down across a table regularly. And we understand each other. Here's what I can do for you, and here's what you care about. This is your role as an exec, a manager, an engineer, an incident responder. And I'm getting AI to help me tailor a little bit better.
And the AI is really allowing you to have more face time and less time, doing grunt work, crunching data and trying to contextualize it manually.
Because in the olden days, i.e. 3 years ago, if I was going to create an event in my threat intelligence platform, which might be MISP or OpenCTI or Eclectic IQ or something else, I'd be working through the report and going like, well, this paragraph describes this technique. All right, now I've got to think how I convert that to a MITRE attack technique, and how am I going to write a detection rule for this? And I'm going to copy and paste a lot of things from the PDF into my intelligence platform. It's a really painstaking process.
No one's going to want to work in an organization where you still got to do that.
That's it.
I can do it for you.
So we've been doing a lot of work, certainly with, getting AI to help us craft those intelligence packages. That said, they absolutely need oversight. You don't want to send them into the wild without, I've had overview, because they miss things, they misrepresent things, but they can get me to 80%. And a lot of teams, they don't even bother trying because they know it is just not humanly possible. And I think humanly possible is kind of the key phrase here. Not humanly possible for me to get through all these reports and produce all these intelligence products of detection rules and reports and summaries, but maybe with some AI assistance, I have a chance now if I'm really smart and targeted about how I use it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We're getting to time. Is there anything else, sort of closing thoughts you want to leave the audience, mainly cyber leaders, about sort of the way to think about threat intelligence in an age of AI?
Yeah, so my takeaway message would be, and hopefully over the course of this chat, we've talked about like more practically what does threat intelligence do? Because again, we talk to a lot of organizations about their threat intelligence programs, and they may not have one yet. So sometimes it's just proving what is the value of this. And to me, not having any kind of threat intelligence program, you're really just relying on stuff on the grapevine. Just coming to you, and you happen to hear the right stories at the right time, and then convert that into either defenses or countermeasures, or what do we need to fund within the organization that's going to protect us against these emerging threats. So in my opinion, a threat intelligence program of some stripe is not an optional thing. It's a rigorous way of making sure that we maximize the chance, that we hear about the near misses, the incidents, the developments in industry. I always like to say that within every defensive team, there's someone with 100 browser tabs open, and that person is your most likely candidate to be a threat intelligence analyst.
Yeah, right.
Because they've got that and I'm one of those people.
Okay.
They've got that bowerbird mentality of like, oh, that report I know who needs to hear this.
Yeah.
And there's almost like this urge you have. Like I read a report and immediately I go like, you know who needs to hear this?
Yeah.
Our CISO, because just the other day they were thinking about this and they need a summary of what's in this massive report so they can go and sort of factor this into their thinking. And anybody who has that mentality, I think, see if you can give them the time to actually think about threat intelligence as a more formal discipline.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Chris, great to have you on. Great thoughts. I learned a lot, so thank you very much, Chris Horsley from Cosive.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
NetSeg!